Hello, this is Kylie with Fem and Flow. I hope you're having a beautiful day. In this episode, I'm inviting you into a real time convergence point, a lived example of how stabilized tone creates echo, how white hole embodiment isn't just a spiritual idea, but a literal grounded mechanic that shapes the quantum field. We often think of synchronicity as a sign that we're aligned, and it is, but it's also a bridge phase. It's a glimpse of how the white hole operates. In a white hole field, synchronicity isn't rare, it becomes the structure. Reality begins responding as design. And that's what this episode explores. So much of what we're doing right now, individually and collectively, is learning how to live in response. And not from control, not from striving, not from pushing, or any of these black hole ideas that we have, but living from coherence. And when you start living this way, your life doesn't just reflect your frequency, it begins to reorganize around it. This episode is a walk through that process, through a spontaneous trip, a concert that turned into a portal, a museum that mirrored my exact words, and a city that revealed its shifting tone through field mechanics. What began as a download became a design, and what began as a design became a lived experience. In my next episode, we'll get into the mechanics of all of this, the nuts and bolts of the architecture of coherence. But before we dive into the details, let's explore this conceptually so you can feel the beauty of it in real life color. And the real life experience I talk about in this episode is only a small glimpse, but it was still so special and I wanted to share it with everyone. So let's begin. So here's a little background on the timeline so some of this makes sense about how it all unfolded. So I wrote this episode on Monday, June 16th, and that day I had just finished editing and scheduling the episode The Art as Architecture, the New Renaissance. And the week before, on Thursday, June 12th, I wrote the episode The Spiral of Cultural Evolution. Honestly, maybe sharing that is more confusing. I don't know. The point is, I wrote these episodes before all of this unfolded in my life. What's wild is the weekend following when I wrote those episodes, my husband surprised me with a trip. First, to see my favorite musician live in Michigan, and then a spontaneous 24-hour trip to New York City. And then we got back the day before I sat down and wrote this episode because it all just felt so surreal. I really wanted to get it down and documented. The concert, without my husband even knowing it, directly reflected the frequency themes I wrote about in Art as Architecture. I even specifically talked about Mike, the musician we went to see. And then New York. So that trip ended up mirroring the exact archetypes I wrote about in The Spiral of Cultural Evolution. And it wasn't just symbolic, it was literal. We visited the Metropolitan Museum of Art and walked through the Egyptian, medieval, Renaissance, and Impressionist wings. And the wildest part was, it wasn't even my idea to go to the Met. The entire trip unfolded through pure resonance. I was not in control of any of it, I was just in flow. And it's like my writing wasn't just a forecast, it was an activation. A tone I anchored that then rewrote the grid around me. I mentioned in a previous episode how this kind of divine unfolding maps to my human design. I'm a 1-3 manifesting generator, which means I move through the world by responding to what shows up, integrating as I go. But there's even more to it. So before I move on, I just want to zoom out and show you the timeline because it's just amazing and honestly, you just can't make this up. So, June 10th, I channeled Art as Architecture, the New Renaissance. June 12th, I channeled The Spiral of Cultural Evolution. And then June 13th, my husband told me more about the trip, where we were going, but he didn't give me details. And then June 14th, we flew to Michigan. My husband surprised me, and I found out what we were doing that night. And that night, we had the Mike concert. And then June 15th, we went to New York City. And this will tie in later, but the No Kings protest passed directly in front of our hotel right as we were going outside, right after we arrived. It was crazy timing. And we also visited the Met. And then June 16th, I sat down to write this. And yes, while I already knew in the moment that it really seemed like my reality was mirroring these scripts I already wrote about, once I started writing, it really solidified how crazy this all was. And I was kind of wowed. The exact themes I downloaded before we traveled showed up in 3D effortlessly, organically, without orchestration by me. And I don't think that's a coincidence. That is resonance. And I actually tried to explain some of this on the fly in the episode Art as Architecture, but to be honest, I barely scratched the surface. And I think that's such a good example of how downloads really come through. They don't always arrive as neat, finished thoughts. Sometimes it starts as a sense, a frequency, a flicker, a knowing. You begin connecting the dots, but you haven't seen the whole picture yet. It's like the pieces drop in intuitively first, and only later does the architecture become clear. At first, it feels big. You feel it more than you can explain it. And then you kind of have to chew on it, metabolize it, and let it move through your system. Then, once you sit down and sift through the pieces, you realize there's been a pattern the whole time. You weren't making it up, you were just catching glimpses of a bigger design. That's what's happening now. I've lived it, I've written it, and now I'm seeing the whole puzzle come together in real time. So, here's what I think is happening. Let's break it down. Because what's happening here is not random. It's not luck, it's not coincidence, it's mechanics. And when you understand the mechanics, the magic becomes repeatable. So, the first piece of this is my human design. I'm a 1-3 manifesting generator. In human design, the 1-3 is here to build a foundation through research and trial and error. But the nuance is this: the 1 line collects deep truth, it studies, it structures, it encodes, and the 3 line experiments with life. It learns through lived experience. It doesn't just download the theory, it walks it. And that's exactly what happened. When I channeled Art as Architecture and the Spiral of Cultural Evolution, I wasn't just scripting an episode, I was writing the vibrational field my life would soon walk into. And that's the true rhythm of a 1-3 manifesting generator. Create, respond, refined, transmit. We manifest through motion, through resonance, through writing the code and letting life press play. And then the second piece of this is white hole stabilization. And this is the part that feels surreal, but it makes perfect sense to me. And yes, I know it's also the part that might sound absolutely insane, but let's be honest. Most of what I say probably sounds insane to some people. I've shared before that I'm working to stabilize in white hole frequency. And what that really means is as I stabilize more and more, My outer world mirrors my inner tone more directly, more precisely, and more quickly than ever before. In my last episode, I talked about how some souls came here as bridge workers and others as white hole stabilizers. And I currently fall into the latter category, but it didn't just flip overnight. I've talked about this before, but on the spring equinox of 2025, a wave of souls began shifting into the stabilized white hole state as a lived energetic baseline. And the shift is part of a much bigger orchestration. It's here to support the planetary polarity shift I've been talking about nonstop. But let's be clear, stabilization did not happen instantly. It's been a process, a slow, sacred one that's involved purging density, recalibrating energetics, and deep integration. For me, it's looked like slowly building internal coherence over time until my inner world started to become more and more stable, more grounded, more clear. That now I'm to the point that my external reality is starting to reflect that back with more precision. I'm seeing my reality mirror me in really funny and fun ways. And I'm not saying this to sound elevated or special in any way. There are many, many, many souls here doing this work, and just as many working as bridges, guiding, translating, lifting. Everyone has an equally vital role. I'm saying this to show just how subtle and how real the shift actually is. And I believe that even after the collective polarity shift happens, it will still feel subtle. It won't be some big dramatic event. It will be a quiet and elegant reordering. And what I've experienced recently feels like a confirmation of that. It seems like I've started to operate more on resonance. The episodes I wrote, channeled from clarity, encoded with truth, became quite literally a frequency instruction to the quantum field. This wasn't old school manifesting. I didn't visualize and hope. I didn't try to force a timeline. I built tone and then walk through the echo. And again, I know this sounds wild, but I also know what I felt and what I saw. And the more I track it, the more clear it becomes. This is how white hole stabilization actually works, as a living reality that quietly reshapes itself to match the coherence you hold inside. And I'll be honest, at first, I actually thought it would feel bigger, more dramatic, more obvious. Then when it didn't, I started questioning everything. I wonder, okay, did it even happen? Was I making this up in my head? Was I just hoping too hard for a breakthrough? But then later that day, and then following, the shifts started happening. And like I said, they weren't loud, they didn't come with fireworks. They were elegant, precise, and honestly unmistakable. Reality didn't explode, it refined. The tone I had anchored began echoing back through micro moments, conversations, invitations, timing, clarity, signs, and synchronicities. It wasn't as loud as I first expected, but it was undeniable. That's when I realized this is the real shift. Not a blast of light from the sky, not a cosmic fireworks show, but an internal upgrade so stable that the external world quietly reorganizes around it. But I was explaining what was happening behind the scenes when my reality started mirroring the exact things I was talking about in my podcast episodes. So here's the next piece of the puzzle. The third piece of what's going on is Oversoul orchestration. And this part is where it gets really cool. Because yes, I'm writing these episodes, but I'm also receiving them. And my Oversoul is arranging the inputs behind the scenes, giving me the exact life experiences that match the codes I'm anchoring. The Mike concert, walking out right as the No Kings protest went by, and the spontaneous trip to the Metropolitan Museum, none of that was random. It was all delivered as experiential keys, living metaphors, so I could metabolize these teachings in real time. It's like I received the map and then walked the terrain, all within a matter of days. So, what's really going on? It's all of it, a perfect convergence. My human design functioning exactly as designed, my white hole embodiment creating an accelerated mirror effect, my oversoul seeding the field with frequency coded experiences, and my coherence allowing me to actually receive it all without distortion. I'm not just witnessing synchronicities, I've become the anchor point around which synchronicity organizes itself. And this is a reminder. This is available to all of us. When your field stabilizes, when your nervous system softens, when your voice becomes clean enough to hold signal, your life stops reacting and starts responding to your tone. And I may do a separate episode on this soon, but it really ties into this, so I'll name it here as well. If you're listening to this, especially right around the time it comes out, I don't think it's by accident. I believe your field called this to you because something in you already recognizes what I'm saying as quantum familiarity or remembrance. You're not just tuning in out of curiosity. You're resonating with a signal your system already knows. That's how quantum entanglement works. Once two fields are attuned, no matter the distance, they begin to co-inform. They pulse, respond, and reorganize through shared frequency. And those of us receiving and stabilizing these codes now, we're doing more than personal embodiment. We're creating the energetic scaffolding of what becomes possible for the whole field. You can think of it like this. In the quantum field, reality is probability until it's observed. And once it's observed, once it's experienced, it collapses into form. That's what we're doing. We're collapsing higher timelines into embodied reality and turning potential into actual patterns, encoding new architectural blueprints into the collective grid. And once that frequency is held, once coherence is stabilized, it becomes instantly more accessible to others. That's why we see a kind of domino effect across history and evolution. Once something that once seemed impossible is anchored, suddenly others can do it. The energetic imprint now exists in the field. It's quantum normalization, frequency availability, energetic precedent. And that's why your stabilization matters. When you become the tone, when your body holds the resonance of a new template, you broadcast that template into the collective wave function. You become a living signal, and others begin to receive it even before they have the words. So if your path feels hard or like there's a lot of steps right now, just know you're carving the path that others will then be able to use as a energetic portal essentially. And if you felt alone, ahead, or strange, you're likely not off. You're just walking the quantum path first. And often, the ones called insane are simply the ones who stabilized before the field was ready to understand. Your path is not just a personal timeline, it's a vibrational corridor that others will walk later. Not by copying your steps, but by tuning into your tone. That's how white hole architecture spreads through stabilized signal, through embodied frequency, through resonance that writes the grid. Before we move on, I want to talk more about convergence points so you can know what to look for. We will experience this more and more as we move into white hole stabilization. So let's talk about convergence points. This ties exactly to the experience I had. A convergence point is a moment when multiple threads of your experience, your thoughts, your embodiment, your energy field, your choices, start syncing up with your external reality in a way that's too precise to ignore. It's the moment where what you've been anchoring internally shows up in the 3D without effort, without planning, without push. This is a convergence point, a divinely sequenced feedback loop between your consciousness, your embodiment, and the external reality grid. What you're experiencing in these moments isn't just synchronicity or coincidence. It's the quantum signature of a stabilized white hole field in motion. It's what happens when your inner tone becomes so coherent, so clean, that the field begins reshaping itself around you to match that signal. And what's important to name here is it doesn't always feel dramatic. Sometimes a convergence point is loud and obvious, but a lot of the time it's subtle. It's in the timing of a conversation, the way a song hits your body, walking out at the exact right moment. It's not that the event is flashy, it's that the alignment is unmistakable. You feel it in your nervous system, you feel it in your breath, you feel it in the deep, quiet part of you that says, "This was placed here for me right on time." When you hit a convergence point, you realize you're not chasing the path anymore. You've become the path. That's what happened to me that weekend. It wasn't just a concert or a quick trip. It was the moment all the threads I had been writing about, the collapse, the art, the frequency, the shift, suddenly showed up fully embodied in my lived experience. That's convergence. That's white hole field mechanics grounded in reality. And once you experience that kind of alignment, you do not forget it. So now let's talk about the Mike concert. Like I said earlier, my husband completely surprised me with the tickets. He knows Mike is my favorite artist, but he had no idea how much I had just been talking about him in the episodes I had written that very week, especially art as architecture. And here's where it gets really interesting. I've talked in past episodes about two related but distinct concepts. First, that in white hole realities, we can create vibrational fields for others to step into. And then, second, that some of us came here to be white hole pillars, stabilized frequency holders whose very tone helps guide the polarity shift on Earth. This isn't just about individual embodiment. It's about setting the frequency that grid will fall into once the false matrix collapses, polarity peaks, and enough people are awake. These white hole tones become the default resonance the field reorganizes around. They act as scaffolding for the new world, quiet vibrational structures that hold coherence when everything else gets loud. What I didn't fully realize until that night was sometimes those two things converge. But it makes sense whether it's a white hole pillar or a coherent being generating a vibrational experience. It all comes down to coherence and frequency. That concert wasn't just fun, it was frequency architecture. And I think Mike is doing both. So, in the past episode, I talked about how I believe Mike, the singer, is a bridge worker. But I also have mentioned that people can be hybrids, bridge workers, and white hole stabilizers. So I think he's doing both of these. He's hybrid and he's generating a vibrational field so clear, so anchored in truth that it functions as a white hole pillar. It regulates, it reminds, it stabilizes. but at the very same time, it's a vibe, it's a wave, it's a whole embodied experience. And that's what hit me. I've been saying for a while that in white hole realities, we'll see people creating full vibrational experiences to let you feel something new, spaces that shift your breath, change your posture, open your fascia, and make you feel more you just by being inside them. Whether it's a DJ set, a fashion show, a dinner party, or someone's home, these experiences won't just entertain, they'll entrain. And that night, I felt like I got a glimpse of what that future looks like. It wasn't just a show, it was a vibrational ecosystem. The field was clean, the resonance was alive, and the wave it sent through my body felt like truth. Not in a dramatic way, but in that subtle, undeniable way your body remembers. So I even told my husband during the concert, it literally feels like I microdosed mushrooms. And that's the thing, I hadn't. But I have something to tie this with because last year at a Mike concert in Chicago, I actually did accidentally microdose. So I took what I thought were bloat pills in my hotel room before the show. And then at dinner, I realized they were mushroom capsules. And it was just a microdose, nothing dramatic. But in the moment when it started working, I was like, am I about to ascend or throw up? And I was sitting in this nice hotel restaurant just waiting on my entree to arrive. And a feeling just came over me that left me totally confused and honestly startled. And I was like, what is going on? I'm racking my brain, like, what is this? And then it hit me. Oh, yeah, right. The bloat pills were actually mushrooms. But once I ate my dinner and I realized I wasn't actually dying, I settled in and had a great time. But fast forward to this recent show, fully sober, and I felt that same open body, expanded field, multidimensional feeling, and actually maybe even more, honestly. And that's when it clicked. This is a glimpse of how white hole vibrational experiences will feel. And some artists are already starting to scratch the surface. And not as some serious ceremony, but as pure fun. What we're seeing now is just the beginning. These early expressions are like tuning forks hinting at what's possible. But in true white hole realities, these vibrational experiences will evolve into something entirely new, immersive, multidimensional, body awakening fields of pure coherence. But what's wild is I felt that eighth dimensional tone without any substance, just from the field. It was that same symbolic, archetypal, multidimensional pulse, only this time it was coming from the coherence of the space itself, which shows what's possible when resonance becomes the portal. As we stabilize in white hole frequency, those same states of perception can begin activating through resonance alone. When you enter a vibrational field that's coherent, open, and harmonically structured, your body doesn't need the chemical bridge like plant medicines. It simply responds. The portal opens in you. And that's what happened at the concert. Mike is one of the few artists I believe is holding that kind of frequency in his music, especially in his recent seasons. I hope it doesn't sound wacky that I'm talking about him in this way. And if he ever listens to this, I hope he doesn't mind. I tagged him, but then later I did see this Instagram post from a random account that said, "Nothing annoys a poet like you explaining their poetry." So I'm like, "Oh shoot, I hope this isn't a sign." But anyways, I'm just giving it as a nice example and putting this whole white hole architecture in a conceptual framework that people can understand. That's all. But like I've said before, his music doesn't just sound good, it transmits. And that night, I got a glimpse of what happens when a transmission field becomes fully immersive. This is what play will feel like in White Hole Realities. It's not just joy for the sake of escape, it's joy that aligns you, it's resonance that upgrades you, it's frequency that rewrites you, gently, subtly, fully. And when someone like Mike creates from that space of embodied tone, they're not just entertaining, they're stabilizing, they're radiating, they're building fields that help the planet shift. It's both, it's always been both. And now I see that more clearly than ever. And it's not just concerts like Mike's. We've been seeing glimpses of this kind of vibrational experience for decades, especially in one of the most unexpected, electric, and often misunderstood places raves. So let's talk about this. Because when you look at what a rave really is, you start to realize it's not just a party, it's not just escapism, it's a field experiment. People dress in fun, expressive outfits. They dance for hours. They connect with strangers in a way that feel oddly intimate. They often take substances that heighten their senses, open their hearts, and make the music feel like a portal. And what do they feel in those moments? Euphoria, unity, awe, light, time collapse, and sometimes the presence of something bigger than themselves. And whether they'd ever call it this or not, they're seeking God. Not the God of doctrine or dogma, but the source their soul remembers. That's what's so important to name here. The Earth experiment, at its core, asked a single question. If we disconnect from source, can we find our way back? That's the game we've been playing. That's the spiral we've been walking. And the answers to that question have taken so many different forms. Some found their way through black hole methods: intensity, distortion, control, dogmatic religion, or addiction. They chased God through substances, status, power, or suffering, believing they had to earn love or survive life to be worthy of connection. Others reached for bridges, transitional tools that help them remember. Things like plant medicines, breath work, fasting, energy healing, even psychedelics at music festivals. These bridges opened just enough of the field to let light in. They were doorways, temporary thresholds where people could feel something more. Not everyone would call it God, but often that's exactly what they were reaching for. And when you view raves through this lens, they become something entirely different. They're not just parties, they're primitive prototypes of future vibrational sanctuaries. Because what happens when the music is right, the energy is clean, and the field is safe? People open, they let go, they remember. Even if it's only for a moment, they taste the unity they forgot was possible. They feel their body melt into rhythm. They dissolve the illusion of separation. They lose their self-consciousness and become motion. And yes, sometimes that experience is aided by substances, but it's not always out of recklessness. Sometimes it's a soul reaching for what it knows is real, but doesn't yet know how to find on its own. The rave becomes the ritual, the outfit becomes the altar, the drop becomes the baptism. And while that space might not always be clean enough to stabilize in white hole frequency, it's often clean enough to open something. And that's the bridge. Bridges are beautiful, but they're not the destination. When treated with reverence, they can realign you. When clung to, they can distort you. because the goal isn't to depend on the bridge. The goal is to cross it. And remember that the frequency you touched was never outside you. It was always yours to stabilize. And I think as we move forward, as more beings stabilize in white hole tone, we'll begin to purify the pattern. We'll create vibrational experiences that don't require the chemical boost, where the music, the light, the environment, and the coherence of the creator are enough. Because here's the secret: your soul isn't addicted to drugs, it's addicted to remembrance. It's chasing that feeling it once had, that wholeness, that expansion, that softness. It's not looking to escape life, it's looking to return to truth. And that's why vibrational experiences are the future of creation. Because once people feel that kind of resonance in a sober, clean, held, beautiful space, they'll never settle for less. And will realize we were never chasing pleasure for pleasure's sake. We were chasing God through frequency. And now we're learning how to find it, not just on the dance floor at 3 a.m., but in our lives, in our bodies, in our homes, and in the resonance fields we build together. And now a new kind of tool is arriving: white hole tools, to return to the frequency of God. These aren't bridges, they're architectures, stabilized fields, living tones. They don't help you search, they help you remember. This is white hole energetic frequency architecture: spaces that calm your system on arrival, sounds that regulate you without effort, art, objects, gatherings coded with coherence, environments where your body lands before your mind understands why. They bring you home to what's always been true. And this is what excites me most. Because if those early experiences were the prototypes, then what we're stepping into now is the blueprint. This is where vibrational experience becomes intentional architecture. Not just music that sounds good, but tone that recalibrates. Not just a beautiful space, but an atmosphere that repatterns your breath. Not just a vibe, but a multidimensional coherence field that reminds your body how to feel safe. That's where we're headed. And it's not just for temples or retreats. It's in the layout of your living room, the playlist you make for your dinner party, the scent of your store, the pacing of your conversation, the clothes you wear on a Tuesday afternoon, the tone of your voice. It's not just about what's happening on the outside, it's about what's being transmitted. And once we begin operating in this way, every space becomes sacred. We realize we're not creating for content, we're creating for coherence. That's the art of white hole vibrational design. Knowing that frequency is the real substance. Knowing that every creation is a field. And knowing that people don't remember what you said, they remember how they felt in your presence. This is the shift from linear output to living field. And it's already happening. We're seeing it in the way people are curating their homes, hosting intimate gatherings, designing spaces for resonance. And the more we create like this, the more Earth begins to feel like the inside of a temple. We stop waiting for a breakthrough moment. We stop outsourcing the high. We stop thinking transformation requires a peak or a purge. Instead, we begin to live inside beauty, inside tone, inside joy, inside vibrational fields that remember us home. Because once the white hole grid fully stabilizes, these experiences won't be the exception. They'll be the new normal. Not because someone channeled them in a trance, but because everyday people learned how to become conductors of coherence. This is what it means to be a white hole creator. You don't force, you don't convince, you build tone, and the field does the rest. And in that way, we don't just shift Earth, we retone it from the inside out. Now let's talk about playing with polarity inside the white hole field. Here's something that has been coming online more clearly for me. Once you're stabilized in white hole frequency, you don't just receive vibrational experiences, you co create them. In black hole reality, we're at the mercy of the room. In bridge states, we're hacking the system, trying to reach altered states through effort, tools, or substances. But in white hole states, we play. Because here's the paradox. White hole coherence holds stability and modulation at the same time. The field itself is pure, clean, steady, but within that purity, there's a full spectrum of tones to choose from. Imagine a DJ set where the baseline is pure coherence, but you can tune yourself into different tracks of the experience. You can drop into stillness, or open into light euphoria, or ride a wave of sensuality. It's not that the external field is pushing one thing, it's that it's so stable, it gives your body the safety to choose. So yes, someone can create a vibrational ecosystem, a field that's encoded with a coherent signal, but then you decide how to dial it. You might tune the experience up into an ecstatic, expansive peak, or down into a quiet, integrated landing. And the best part is you don't need to try because you're not reaching anymore, you are responding. And that's what's so different in white hole vibrational design. It's not about chasing a peak, it's about having the capacity to explore range without losing center. So, yes, altered states still exist in the white hole, but they're not disorienting or addictive. They're harmonic and safe. Because when you're in white hole frequency, the coherence holds the container, the body feels safe to open, and the polarity becomes a playground, not a prison. This is the future of experience design. Not just setting a vibe, but building a frequency field that lets everyone inside modulate their own reality. Because when the base tone is love, coherence, and safety, you can stretch, expand, feel, explore without ever leaving yourself. And this is where it gets personal because it's not just about what other people are creating, it's about what we're here to create too. And I've known this for a while now. Part of my path is to architect white hole vibrational experiences, not just through my podcast, but through the entire Fem and Flow ecosystem, through every touch point, every offering, and every space. We're entering a new era where brand experiences aren't just about aesthetics or messaging. They're about energetic architecture. And I've realized I'm here to build spaces that don't just look good or make sense, but to feel like something. And just like that concert or that rave or that spontaneous trip to the Met, these experiences aren't about pushing people towards growth. They're about letting people feel themselves in a way they haven't in a very long time. It's remembrance through resonance. It's alignment through immersion. And the best part, it can be fun. It can be elegant. It can be light. We don't need to make it heavy to make it holy. And we don't need to suffer our way into higher states. We just need to stabilize the tone and open the field. And that's what I'm starting to do now. That's what I'm starting to do behind the scenes. Now I want to talk about cities. I did an episode on this before, but I want to deepen it and talk about the role of cities in this polarity shift. I've said before that cities have historically functioned as nodes of black hole control. They've been dense, fast, overstimulating, and saturated with collective noise. And that's not by accident. Cities were designed energetically and architecturally to fragment coherence, to keep people disembodied, reactive, distracted, and disconnected from their own tone. They've served as harvesting hubs for distorted energy because when you cram millions of nervous systems into close proximity, you create a feedback loop of urgency, polarity, and unconscious leaking. So, yes, cities have carried a stronger collective consciousness, but not necessarily in a good way. They've been less sovereign, more influenced, less reflective, and more reactive. But as we spiral up into white hole frequency, that changes. Because white hole stabilization doesn't just shift individual lives, it shifts the grid. And when enough people stabilize tone within a city, that city stops being a distortion node and starts becoming a convergence point. It doesn't mean cities disappear, it means they reorganize. We'll start seeing more white hole sanctuaries tucked within the noise, a boutique that feels like a frequency bath, a brownstone that holds temple resonance, a dinner party that recalibrates your breath, a subway ride that somehow opens your heart. Because white hole creators don't need perfect circumstances. They build coherence in spite of the noise. And here's the key: some cities will spiral out, some will dissolve entirely, but others, where the tone is strong enough, will flip. They'll become harmonic hubs, living examples of what happens when the frequency takes root in old soil. And this is why white hole pillars are so important. They stabilize that frequency until the field reorganizes around them. And cities, once used for control, will become convergence points for remembrance. And we have to talk about New York City, because if there's any place that embodies the paradox of the shift, it's New York. For a long time, New York City was one of the clearest examples of black hole architecture. Hyperspeed systems, status games, financial extraction, overstimulated nervous systems, collective tone shaped by urgency, competition, and survival. It was a masterclass in fragmentation, and for many, it still is. But underneath that chaos, something is changing. New York has always been a portal, a mirror, a myth-making machine. And now, as the polarity flips, we're starting to see white hole frequencies slip in through the cracks. You won't feel it everywhere, but you will feel it in some places. Maybe a pocket of stillness in Central Park, a bookstore that feels like a temple, a small cafe where the energy is so grounded you forget you're in a city of 8 million. A conversation on a park bench that suddenly opens your heart. I felt this clearly in some places on my recent trip. One of the places that really landed for me was the Impressionist wing at the Met. I wouldn't say the energy of the space itself felt dramatically different, but the artwork, that did something to me. There's something about Impressionist art that is starting to really, really resonate with me. It feels soft, ethereal, almost weightless. Like it's not trying to capture form, but to translate feeling. The colors, the motion, the light, they bypass analysis and go straight to the nervous system. It's not just aesthetically beautiful, it's tonally beautiful. Like it's carrying the frequency of something your soul already knows. To me, that's why it feels white hole coded. Not because it's overtly spiritual, but because it's light translated into form in a way that opens your breath. It doesn't overwhelm, it doesn't try too hard. It just reminds you of something simple, quiet, and real. That's how I was experiencing Impressionist art. Another place in New York I felt was very white hole coded was Printemps. And I have no idea if I'm saying that right. I've never heard that word been spoken out loud. And I had never even heard of this before. It was a recommendation. I just went with the flow. And when I walked inside, I was stunned. It didn't feel like a store, it felt like an experience. The design was exquisite, elevated, ethereal, refined. The colors, the structure, the spatial rhythm, everything felt so intentional. I even overheard someone say, people don't even come here to shop, they come here to take photos and experience it. And that's when it hit me. This was Whitehole vibrational design. Not spiritual, not overt, just beauty that calibrates, architecture that regulates, tone held through form. While I was there, I remember thinking, this is Whitehole reality design. Everything felt special, exquisite, intentional, crafted purely for beauty, style, and the joy of experience itself. From the black hole lens, you might think, why would they spend all this money on just the design? Like, how does this pencil out financially? But in the white hole, you just create with beauty and what you love because it resonates and it mirrors part of your soul. And then another place in New York, of course, was Central Park. That's always been a sanctuary in the city, and it really holds its own rhythm. I felt incredible there, like my body could finally breathe. And I'll be honest, as beautiful as those moments were, I felt very energetically overwhelmed at times. The noise, the crowds, the constant motion, it definitely pulled at me more than I expected. Yes, I do think the black hole current is still strong there, but I do think that even in cities that are starting to flip, we're still dancing between layers. The white hole is arriving, but the black hole isn't gone. That's the in between we're in right now. The polarity shift is real, but it's layered, textured, and still unfolding. New York won't flip overnight, but the white hole codes are arriving. The pillars are stabilizing, and the field is beginning to respond. And that's the thing about cities like New York. They aren't just backdrops for the shift, they're nodes, charged focal points in the polarity field. Because when you concentrate that many people in one place, you amplify whatever tone is running through the grid. So, what happens when you have a city with thousands caught in distortion, hundreds starting to wake up, and a handful holding stabilized white hole tone? You get a live polarity field, a place where the pressure builds, the frequencies stretch, and the shift begins to spark. In the last episode, I talked about the three things needed to flip planetary polarity. Number one, polarity must stretch to its extreme, to the point of collapse. Number two, enough people must be awake, not to everything, but to something. And then number three, white hole stabilizers must hold tone to become the frequency scaffolding we collapse into. And when I landed in New York, I felt all three at play. The distortion was loud, collective nervous systems running hot, egoic energies inflamed, and urgency crackling in the air. But so was the wakefulness. Not everyone was asleep. There was awareness in the field, frustration, yes, but also alertness. And then there was me, just arriving, working on stabilizing in my white hole tone. I didn't know what I was walking into that day. I had just gotten to my hotel. I went upstairs and dropped off my suitcase and then headed back down. And right as my husband and I stepped outside, the No Kings protest came marching by, literally right in front of our hotel doors. The police were all out there and people were saying we might want to wait. So we stood there and watched it unfold. And it hit me. I'm watching the polarity stretch in real time. The first pillar, polarity peaking, was right in front of me. A collective uprising, an archetypal revolt, a loud moment in the field. And the second pillar, enough people awake, was woven all throughout. You see it all over now, that even if people don't have the full framework, they know something is off and they're asking questions. And then the third pillar, white hole stabilizers. Well, I realized in that moment I was one of them. Not better, not louder, not above, just quiet, clear, and coherent, holding tone in a sea of distortion. And it hit me. This is the equation playing out in reality. This is what it looks like when a city becomes a node in the polarity shift. The polarities stretch, the people stir, the pillars hold. And when the frequency reaches a critical threshold, it flips. It doesn't have to be dramatic, but it's energetic, and it's already underway. New York won't flip in a day, but it is happening. You might not see it in the headlines, but you'll feel it in the fields, in the tone of a cafe, in the elegance of a display, in the timing of a conversation, in the stabilizers who walk quietly holding signal. It's not just a city anymore, it's a convergence point. And once you see that, you stop trying to escape the noise and start anchoring the signal. Because that's the real evolution of this process. Not just stabilizing the frequency, but starting to design with it. Once a city begins to flip from distortion to coherence, you'll see the rise of field design, not in a theoretical way, but in lived architecture. And it's already beginning. White hole creators don't need silence to create resonance. They create through the noise. And the tone they hold becomes a blueprint that reshapes the field around them. And this is the next layer of the shift. Not just white hole embodiment, not just polarity mirroring, but intentional energetic architecture. When we talk about white hole field design, we're talking about tone that opens rather than overwhelms, space that regulates, not stimulates, atmospheres that entrain nervous systems rather than hijack them, beauty that stabilizes the body before the mind can explain why. These spaces are not just aesthetic, they're anatomical. They work on the fascia, they work on the breath, they work on the rhythm of thought. And this is why cities are becoming so important again. Because once enough of these fields are anchored, once enough white hole nodes activate in proximity, a critical mass tips the grid. A city becomes a vibrational sanctuary. Not because the system was dismantled, but because the tone became strong enough to override it. That's where we're headed. A future where resonance reorganizes architecture, where design isn't just visual, it's vibrational. And when a city begins to hum with that kind of beauty, people remember, people soften, people feel God again. Not in a cathedral, but in the color of a wall, in the pacing of a conversation, in the scent that lingers at the top of a staircase. That's field design. That's white hole architecture. That's the future of cities. And that's what we're building one tone at a time. So, thank you for being here. That's all I have for today. I love you all and tune in for the next episode. Have a great week.